Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
And a request for motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor made by Commissioner Stokes, seconded by Vice Mayor Langdon. There's nothing to that. That passes 5-0. City Clerk, public comment?
My name is David Menchie. I am a resident in Northport and the Skyview area. This is my phone number is 803-280-7975. This is in regards to City Commission regular meeting on 7/21/26 at 10 a.m. Item number 26-0911. Staff summary item 26-0985 in regards to data center moratorium. My comment is I do not support data centers in Northport at all. They are not good for the environment. They are not good for a homeowner and water or property taxes or anything. I do not support data centers in Rock Hill. I do not support data centers in Northport, Florida. Thank you.
Cheryl Cook. I would like to address ordinance number 2026-15 and the creation of the Activity Center 6 and 10 Infrastructure District. My concern is that the city is being asked to establish a new governmental and financing structure before the public knows the full scope of the infrastructure needs, the total cost, the assessment methodology, or the long-term financial obligations. The agenda materials state that the city anticipates costs for infrastructure planning, consultant services, assessment studies, and ongoing district administration. While some of these costs may eventually be reimbursed through future assessments, those commitments are still being made before the public has a complete understanding of the financial impact. Creating a special district and authorizing a future assessment process should come after the necessary studies have been completed, not before. The infrastructure, master plan, and assessment methodology and benefit studies should inform the decision. This commission has emphasized the importance of fiscal responsibility. Fiscal responsibility means knowing the costs, risks, and obligation before creating a mechanism that could impact future taxpayers and property owners. I respectfully request that the commission slow this process down, complete the necessary due diligence, and provide the public with a full understanding of the financial commitments before moving forward. Christine Wilkins. Good morning, Commissioners. Currently, there are over 5,400 data centers nationwide. By now, you are aware of the harm it will cause our wildlife, trees, and humans with stripping the lands, draining our aquifers, we're in a drought, and substantially increasing our electricity. Has any considered that it would also make us a military target? The noise and water pollution have ramifications that would last for lifetimes, PFOS chemicals. The data centers receive tax breaks, but what do the citizens of Northport receive? Lowered home values? I have lived in Northport for 8 years. In 2023, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, so I take my health very seriously. I have read about tonal vibrations that extend for miles from the data centers. They cause nausea, dizziness, headaches, etc. It is something you are advocating for the citizens of Northport. How do those vibrations affect the wildlife and protect species? How about the many windows in my neighborhood? There are 5 in my 4-block radius. Do you think they can shoulder the insane monthly electricity bill increases? Some of them are barely getting by from their homeowners' taxes. I noticed that this planning was all done in secret with no transparency and with an NDA. How do you think this makes the citizens of Northport feel knowing that we're potentially being sold out in secret? I hope you're prepared to think about all of us, the people and wildlife in the city. We, the people, elected you to make the best decisions for us in our best interest. We are telling you no, we do not want a data center. I'm praying that you will all make the best decision. Thank you for your time. In person, I have Pam Tokars, followed by Tim Ritchie and Robin San Vicente.
Good morning. I'm going to address the amount of jobs that data centers create, because I know that's a big concern with a lot of people going out of town to work. The amount of jobs that data center creates based on the size of data center. The bigger data centers don't really use a lot of employees because they use AI to help run those data centers. So anything from I believe 100 megawatts up to 1,000 megawatts you have to take, and I went on the high side, 0.3 people times the megawatt. So if you're gonna do I'm gonna write in the middle, a 500 megawatt facility, which is the second one down, it's really gonna only create 150 jobs. Or someplace like Northport, it might go down to 100 megawatt, that would be 30 jobs. And if you go down to a 20 megawatt one, the smaller ones use more people because they don't usually use AI to support their operation. So you're looking at about 6 jobs per megawatt. Unfortunately, I did not multiply that out. So, but we need to look at the bigger picture. If you do decide to bring, but I know this is just a moratorium discussion, but in the future, if we do move forward with AI and also across the country, we need to think about the bigger picture with the ramifications that AI will bring to the country. AI is going to be good for everyone? I don't know. It might be, it might not. But as more and more people integrate AI into their operations, I know City Manager Fletcher had mentioned that they were going to look at AI to help with some of the streamlining with city operations. You already have self-driving cars. You've got in the bigger cities little robots that deliver. So now if you got self-driving cars, you're going to start to eliminate jobs. As this AI comes around and develops, now we're looking at people like me, you, everyone here. What are we going to do for work? We're not going to do anything. So now you think you're bringing more jobs, all the people that have small businesses here, they're going to start to lose customers, and they're going to disappear. You're going to start to have people not be able to support a household anymore. Now your tax base is going to start to go down. So when we go forward, if you decide to put a moratorium on and we study some of these issues, because I know there's some other people here that are subject matter experts in other items, you need to include the community going forward in your discussions with what you decide. And then you also need to know, if you decide to put data centers in and you start giving the citizens water restrictions, good luck with them following it, because if there's a data center and you're using water for that, I'm using water too. Thank you.
Tim Ritchie?
Well, good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? It's been a while since I've been up to the city of Northport. And I'm sure Miss Jill Luke is watching, so good morning, Miss Jill. Good morning, Alice and Debbie. You know, we have a real problem from Tampa Bay to Charlotte Harbor. We have Tampa Bay, Charlotte Harbor. We have the Alafia River, the Little Manatee, the Mayaca, and Peace River. Every day, those rivers have millions of gallons daily of blended, acidic, chemically laden wastewater discharged into each one of those rivers from outfalls. And FDEP issues the NPDES permit that allows for this. Mosaic has one water permit, just an example. 70 million gallons. Maximum capacity, 87 million. This is Mosaic South Fort Meade. This is on the other side of the Peace River, where Shell Creek is. This here is Mosaic Ona. Now, I'm here telling you about Mosaic because I haven't been up here for a while. The city of Northport did a great thing when you guys banned phosphate mining. We also banned fracking. That was when Jill Luke was on this board, Debbie McDowell. I have to share this with you. We are in a serious water crisis in the state of Florida. SWFMA just extended the phase 3 till October. It's not that we need a moratorium on these data centers. We need a permanent ban. City of Punta Gorda, Charlotte County, DeSoto County, Fort Meade, Polk, Hardy, Manatee, the entire area must have a complete ban on data centers. You know what they're really talking about to power these now? Do any of you want a nuclear reactor in your city? We have too many great unknowns, just like with Mosaic. They self-govern, they self-monitor. I'm looking forward to speaking again on the data center. Thank you very much. We need to protect our water.
Robin San Vicente, followed by Chuck English and Samuel Turpin.
Good morning, all. First, I just want to thank you for having this discussion. It is definitely needed, and it's overdue. I'm going to start reading from what I've prepared so I don't get distracted. So I would first want to look at the definition of a data center, which actually contains the IT infrastructure for storing, processing, distributing data, and the running and the shared distributed applications and services. They can be anything from a dedicated space with a building, or within a building, dedicated building, or for the large-scale data centers, multi-building campuses. The current technological environment, along with the digital economy boom, we are in the need for processing all of this information, which means kind of we're going to fall subject to this particular type of industry. I've decided to take another approach on my general public comment because there is factual scientific supporting data on the amount of natural resources it takes, the associated health risks, disruptions to our bodies, quality of life, and our right to quiet enjoyment issues. The fragmentation of our natural environment, the pollution and climate change elements, and the health disruptions to our wildlife. The situation we find ourselves in now reminds me of the explosion of the Industrial Revolution that took place when we allowed and we knew before what we were getting into and the harmful repercussions of a lot of those industries that were also blanketed under a category in order to cloak and hide it. It's the same thing with the technology explosion. They too are masked and cloaked under several types of categories to circumvent public scrutiny, and to this day, we still do not have all the information necessary to properly regulate, safeguard ourselves, the environment, and wildlife. Therefore, it is extremely important that we take the time to accurately assess all of the data required to implement proper citywide protocols, guidelines, in the name of public health and safety. In the attachments to the forthcoming agenda item, you reference Florida Senate Bill 180, and in reviewing this bill, it is imperative that we institute a moratorium now because the provisions become effective 1 year after a hurricane makes landfall. That is kind of leaving the door open for anything to walk into our development and planning and building department today or tomorrow. And we're in the middle of hurricane season. Another attachment is Florida Senate Bill 484, which has many provisions in it, some good, some bad, but especially the language used in the reclaimed water usage. That really needs to be changed. The bill does, however, specify that local governments maintain authority to exercise power and responsibility over comprehensive planning and land development regulations relating to large load customers. This must all be taken into consideration as well. I'm going to end it with my question. If we could do the timeline of instituting an ordinance, because of that, I would respectfully ask the city attorney. Okay, it's coming back then. Thank you.
Good morning. I hope you all have a blessed day. Tim and Robin pretty much summed up a lot of what I was going to say, but I think it's going to be something that's bothered me for a long time is the fact city staff, who are outstanding, by the way, are considered the only subject matter experts within our community. I believe today you'll find out there are many, many more that are concerned, you know, and I keep hearing this vocal minority stuff, right? Yeah, those people are very concerned, or they wouldn't be a vocal minority. They're concerned for the people who do not pay attention, who do not understand the impact of issues that come before you. And today, I think we pretty much will gain a significant amount of wisdom as it relates to the concerns about data centers. Thank you.
Samuel?
Good morning, my name is Samuel Turpinning, Mayor Commissioners Board. Since this is my first meeting to address this critical issue, I am standing here to ensure this board establishes an ironclad foundation of factual reality right from day one. If you look across the United States, local communities are being severely strained by the data center industry. Northport does not need to sit back and react defensively. You have the structural power to solve this issue before it ever impacts our community. Our American electric grid carries a D+ rating. It is already under immense stress. Right now, in the heat of the summer, regular citizens face rolling blackouts because the grid is pushed to its absolute limits. We simply do not have the surplus power to hand over to the high-density server complexes. We also do not have the water. Look at the recent DeSoto testimony right in our own backyard. Lifelong born and raised Florida residents are on the official record stating they have never seen the Peace River as catastrophically low as it is today. Our regional water table is facing unprecedented strain in allowing massive industrial consumers to withdraw millions of gallons more from our ground is a physical impossibility. This is exact vulnerability is why our communities need true citizen engagement, not passive observation. We need a village of public, independent citizens standing collectively to expose facts, protect public resources, and demand structural accountability. When regular people unite to protect their local water supplies and infrastructure from corporate deception, the collective voice of the community becomes unassailable. Further, under Federal National Security Mandate Executive Order 13920, it is illegal to connect high-voltage grid equipment manufactured by foreign adversaries, specifically the People's Republic of China, to our bulk power system. The domestic American supply chain for these massive transformers is completely bottlenecked, with lead time stretching past 4 years. There are currently 0 compliant domestic manufacturers who can deliver these parts on a speculative timeline. Developers build this infrastructure without risking a violation of federal and national security laws or relying on compromised foreign hardware. The state of Florida hands a regulatory hammer directed to this board. Senate Bill 484 explicitly preserves your supreme municipal land use authority over large load utility consumers. If you act firmly at this very first meeting to pass a permanent zoning exclusion banning these high-intensity data centers before any formal permit applications are filed, you completely neutralize the Burt Harris Act. The developers will have 0 vested rights, 0 existing use, and absolutely 0 footing to sue the city. I urge this commission on not to rely on a temporary moratorium that leaves our future uncertain and keeps the corporate backdoor cracked open. Use as explicit legal tools the state has already granted you. Protect our grid, protect our water table, and pass a preemptive municipal zoning ban now. Thank you.
All right, announcements?
The current vacancies for the following boards and committees include the Art Advisory Board, Auditor Selection Committee, Charter Review Advisory Board, Citizen Tax Oversight Committee, Community Economic Development Advisory Board, Environmental Advisory Board, Historic and Cultural Advisory Board, Joint Management Advisory Board, Arts and Recreation Advisory Board, and the Planning and Zoning Advisory Board. If anyone would like more information, please see the city clerk's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda, city manager, has any items been pulled?
No, sir.
All right. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda?
There is none.
All right. Then I request a motion.
I'll make it, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the items in the consent agenda as presented.
Have a motion on the floor made by Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Duval to approve the items in the consent agenda as presented, please vote. That passes 5-0. Moving on to general business, item A 26-0985, discussion of possible action regarding data center moratorium. City manager, this is your item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to turn it over to the city attorney, Mr. Flynn, and lead the discussion.
Thank you, Manager. Thank you, Mayor. This was a commission instituted agenda item that I drafted to kind of give you a legal framework of where we are with data centers. I'm not making any recommendations. What I'll do at the end is I'll run through your options and look at the risks for what they have. The data centers are not defined under your Unified Land Development Code like they would be allowable uses in those zoning districts that generally allow for things such as light industrial or heavy industrial based on the type of development that is being proposed. So that's your local law. The state laws, and you've heard a couple of them mentioned in our public comments that we should consider, and they've been attached to your agenda item, or SB 484, which is a new law that was just signed by the governor a few weeks ago. And amongst other things, what the law says is it allows the local governments to continue to regulate data centers, for lack of a better term, through comprehensive planning and land development regulations. It's basically a legislative espousal of what our home rule authority would do. SB 484 runs up against another law that you should be cognizant of that was passed on the 2025 legislative session, which was SB 180, which was a comprehensive bill that was passed after the hurricanes in 2024, 2025 that says a bunch of things, including that after for 1 year after a hurricane makes landfall, you are essentially deregulated from instituting regulation if the hurricane makes within 100 miles of your path. It also says, for our purposes, that for all counties that were affected, that were on the federal disaster relief order from FEMA for hurricanes Debbie, Milton, and Helene, as well as all municipalities within those counties, which includes moratorium. You are prohibited until October 1st of 2027 to do three things. You cannot issue a moratorium on the construction, reconstruction, or development of any property affected by those hurricanes. You cannot institute more burdensome or stringent land development regulations or amendments to your comprehensive plan. And you cannot impose any more burdensome or restrictive land development processes. What have counties and cities around the state, including those that are within the SB 180 zone that I just talked about, done in response to data centers? Well, they have instituted temporary moratoriums. So what's a moratorium? Well, a moratorium is a planning tool that is utilized to study a certain aspect, in this case would be data centers. They're passed by ordinance generally, so they require 2 readings. And in order to comply with those issues with SB 180, you would have to do a few things. You'll have to make findings that the moratorium itself is not a more burdensome or stringent land development regulation or process. And you also have to carve out lands affected by the hurricanes that I mentioned. How do you make that finding that it is not a more burdensome or restrictive regulation? Well, that goes back to the heart of what the moratorium is. What I just said, it's a planning tool. It's not something that you do merely because you don't like data centers, because the public doesn't like data centers, or something like that. You use it as a means to study an issue, to either come back to regulations or to not, because you have questions, concerns, and comments of that nature. So, like I said, you don't do a moratorium just to do a moratorium. There's a reason behind it. And therefore, a couple of questions that you should ask yourselves before instituting a moratorium is, one, do you think you need time to study the issue itself? And then two, what capital, whether it's consultant fees or staff time, are you willing to invest in that? And that will ensure that we're using it for the proper means as a planning board. Another issue we want to consider with moratoriums is that they should be temporary in nature. If you do a permanent ban or an extended ban, what you'll be running up against are taking clause issues under both the United States Constitution and the federal Constitution. You'll also be opening up yourselves to potential statutory causes of action under the Herd Habits Act. The final issue you should generally consider when you do your discussion and your thinking is whether you should, when you do a moratorium ordinance, do you want to make the moratorium, the ordinance, retroactive to pending applications or only prospective in nature after the effective date of the ordinance? And by that, what I mean is pass an ordinance and on second reading, and you can or cannot make it applicable to any data center application, for lack of a better term, that has been submitted during the pendency of your debate, or you just make it, effective to those applications that would have been received after the effective date of the ordinance, meaning after you would have adopted on second or third reading. I've attached to your agenda items, two ordinances which have been passed. One is by Zephyr Hills, which is a municipality in Pasco County, and the other one is Hernando County. So you kind of see the differences in the last issue that I just spoke about. Zephyr Hills made their moratorium, I think it was 12 months, good for all, retroactive in nature, meaning that it was for any and all pending applications that may have been shown at the time of adoption of the ordinance. On the other hand, Hernando County made it prospective in nature, meaning that they just did it for any applications which may have been received after the effective date of the ordinance. And that all issue comes down to whether or not, how much you want to be worried about a potential applicant's agreed party, whether you want to call vested rights. And those vested rights are ultimately determined by the court under what the court would consider to be the principles of equitable estoppel, which is just a way of saying, what, if anything, did the government say to the applicant? Did the applicant rely on those representations? And did the applicant change his position in reliance on those representations? And the court finds the answer to those questions to be yes, then they could do a wide variety of things, including voiding the ordinance that you made with retroactive in nature, and awarding the applicant damages, attorney's fees, costs, and monetary damages. So those are the legal issues around the moratoriums, which is what one of the planning tools that local governments across the state have done. What are your options and what legal risk? Well, the risk-free option is to do nothing and to allow your current law to stand that I talked about in the beginning. If you do nothing, it's risk-free because no one has a claim. You don't have to worry about SB 180. You don't have to worry about taking clauses. You don't have to worry about Bert Harris, and you don't have to worry about anyone's vested rights. If you do a moratorium, the riskiest way of doing the moratorium would be to do it retroactive in nature, meaning that you would do it as to any pending applications that are in the system at the time of adoption. And the less riskier option would be to do it as to only to those applications which have been submitted after the effective date of the ordinance. So that's where you are. What I would suggest if we do an ordinance, a moratorium, is to carve out those lands which may have been affected by the hurricanes Debbie, Helene, and Milton from the moratorium, And I would also say that you should include in the ordinance something similar to what you would see in the Hernando County ordinance, which would be a process by any party who may be aggrieved by the ordinance, property owner, developer, and whatever the case may be, can seek some relief from the ordinance, either through a quasi-judicial hearing before you all to see if you want to take the relief from the moratorium. You don't have to decide all of those issues right now. What the board should decide is, first and foremost, does it want to do a moratorium? No. If the answer is no, then it's a discussion, you're not going further. If the answer is yes, then you should decide how long you want the moratorium to last for, keeping in mind that the purpose of the moratorium is to have a reasonable amount of time to study the issue, to answer whatever questions you may have, and then to decide whether or not you want the moratorium to be retroactive in nature or prospective in nature. With that, that is my overview. I'll kick it back to the board for any questions, concerns, or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Stokes, you're in the queue.
Let's start with first question. I'll address, I guess, this, I don't know who the staff wants to answer it. Is there, as of this moment in time, a formal application for a data center? Has that been submitted to the city of Northport?
Any questions?
Good morning, Elaine Ray, Director of Government Services. There has been a zoning verification letter request, and that was issued. There has also been a voluntary master concept plan application that was submitted, reviewed, and comments returned to the applicant that indicated compliance with the ULDC and the comprehensive plan. There has not been a formal site development plan application submitted as of yesterday, but we would need to check the system to see if anything came through last night or this morning.
Next question I have is, recognizing some of the legal, the legal perspectives. Ms. Lane, if you'd stay around, because most of these questions are directly to you, for you to answer, as you are one of our subject matter experts on this subject. So my question is, presently, as I understand it, correct me along the way if I'm wrong, the comp plan and the ULDC actually never mentioned data centers.
Correct, just as many other industrial uses are not mentioned specifically.
So with that said, I'm going to skip over what could be literally conversation on infinitum about, the 4 areas of concern: water, power, air quality, and sound. There are a plethora of technologies, some of which exasperate those 4 areas, some of which may mitigate them to some level of people's satisfaction. That's, to me, not an issue before us, since there has not been a formal application, there's not been a master development plan. We have no idea, were someone to want to build one here, what technologies they would use to build it. My question is this: do we have the ability, under Bill 180 and the Burt-Harris Act, and now offset by 484, do we have the ability to write ordinances, change our ULDC or comp plan such that we create guardrails and restrictions and actually identify levels of technology we would require in order for a data center to come here? Or would that be considered more burdensome and restrictive?
So there are 2 paths that we would need to take. One, our noise ordinance does not live in the ULDC. It lives in the city code. That is not a land development regulation. Therefore, we can adopt changes to that at any time. I do have criteria that is very successful for mitigation of potential data center noise, that we could adopt into the city code at any time. So we are not limited by SB 180 to do that. The ULDC, we could make changes to it. However, we would need to stipulate that changes would be effective October 1st, 2027, or the repeal or amendment of SB 180. And until that time, we would voluntarily seek compliance from any potential applicant. And I can tell you, having worked with most of the data center companies out there, they will voluntarily comply with just about anything.
So I guess, part of, my concern has been along the way that, okay, let's take water, for instance. Closed loop systems, which are really more in the forefront of data centers that are being built presently, those closed loop systems use virtually no water at all. So the issue of water really goes away. But the question is, what do we as a municipality, as an elected body, what legal right do we have to mandate that and remember, the developer here, if a developer owns a massive amount of land, they're not gonna build all this stuff themselves. They're gonna partner with companies that build data centers, that build tech businesses, that build whatever might eventually be part of this activity center, so to speak. So my question is, what legal right do we have to mandate the technology that would be used? What if a company that wants to build a data center says, well, we really can't afford this cutting edge technology. We're gonna build something it's not gonna use as much water as like the old ones did, but it's gonna use some water. Or we're gonna soundproof everything, but we're not gonna do all the buffering and all the structural things that could mitigate sound to the point where you could stand on a roof or next door to it and not hear or feel any vibration. How do we legally mandate that? Do we have the legal right to do that? And I'm not hearing that we do. That's part of my concern. So there doesn't appear to be a whole lot we can do here to control what might happen in the eventuality an applicant came forward and decided to take us down that opportunity path.
So I think 484 still gives us the rights that we would normally have within our home rule function to regulate those types of issues, especially water usage and buffering and noise, those types of things. We could still put into our ULDC and mandate that they comply with that. The mandate would be effective, as I said, October 1, 2027, and/or the repeal or amendment of SB 180, whichever came first. But we would seek voluntary compliance until then. We can, within those regulations, require that technology be utilized that reduces or eliminates the need for water. So the closed loop systems, there are closed loop systems. I've been in a data center that was state of the art, used for its cooling, only used the amount of water that an average single family home would use on a daily basis. That's new technology from 5 years ago. I know there have been a lot of changes. If a company doesn't want to do that, they don't have to build here. It's that simple. The city does not have to allow technology that we don't want within our city. If a company wants a waiver from something in our land development code, they have a method for doing that. They can come to the commission and ask, and the commission has the ability to approve it or deny it.
So we basically could do quite a number of things that would wouldn't necessarily make them more burdensome or restrictive, but would certainly make them more responsive.
Absolutely. There are a number of things that we can do to, if if the commission wanted to proceed down that road, that we could adopt to address those issues. Absolutely.
So now, more directed at city attorney. Okay, so there is a doctrine, a pending ordinance doctrine. Okay, pending ordinance doctrine says that, and I'm paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, that, you know, in a case like this, to take it to the specific of a data center, since no formal application has been submitted, to the extent this governing body decides to, and I would assume this meeting would serve that purpose, a formal public notice that we might intend to enact a moratorium. That's one of the two pieces that helps create legal strength, okay? The second being the issuance of the first reading and approval of the first reading of an ordinance. Were those two steps to be taken, would you concur that there would be a greater legal chance that the city would prevail were they challenged versus not issuing a moratorium, moving down an opportune path to talk about, explore further, discuss the pros and cons of the data center, get a multitude of questions and concerns answered and addressed, and 6 months to a year down the road, were the governing body to decide this is really not a direction we want to go, would you then, in comparing those two, say that we would be on stronger legal footing, were we to have acted, as I said initially, by issuing a moratorium rather than not? I'm not saying exactly what I would like to, but I think you get the message.
It would help the defense of pending ordinance doctrine. That's where I think you're going with it. The pending ordinance doctrine says that when the government has something in works, and even if the applicant doesn't know about it, but they intend to enact the law, the applicant itself will be stopped from the development order or permit until the new law goes into place. So it could help. I think it would be it would help.
And the reason I bring it up is, you know, one should never truly shut their mind to anything. And yet at the same time, there are so many questions and unanswered questions. Nobody's tested SB 484 against Bert Harris or 180. I'm not sure Northport should be that poster child. You know, I also feel that, you know, technology is ever changing, and the opportunity to be able to mitigate concerns that people have may well exist for all we know. But that said, the ability to go from what is conceptual to here's the actual plan is a big leap. And without the ability to put some of the guardrails in place that Ms. Elena mentioned, it seems to me that in order to protect the city and the health and welfare of our community, in order to take those measures and those steps and protect ourselves from a potential applicant jumping in and establishing some legal ground, okay, to me, I see being more protective, still allowing a process of conversation to go on, because if what Ms. Elena says is true, and the folks that build these things really want to be good neighbors, one would certainly think that this isn't their first rodeo, so they kind of figure there's lots of pushback, right? So if they are coming with good intentions, then I would think that they would be cognizant of our concerns, be willing to have the patience and work with us as a city, and not be chased away by the fact that we might enact a temporary moratorium for the purpose of better understanding and getting a better picture of how it is they might actually make something like this happen. And within our community. It just seems to me that it's the prudent and more thoughtful, approach to this issue, because I do feel that we could talk about this for weeks on end. We're never going to satisfy ourselves as to whether or not we can mitigate all these issues, and whether this would be, just a great opportunity. I've said it, is this a golden goose, or is this the Trojan horse? And, I don't want to go there yet, because there's so much we don't know. So, with that, I'm happy to, let my fellow commissioners weigh in. I'm anxious to hear what everybody has to say on this. I may or may not have some more to say from the day's time, but I probably will make a motion there when everybody's had their say.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Vice Mayor, you're in the queue.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner Stokes. You asked a lot of the same questions and made the same comments that I've been thinking about. One of the other areas that I've gotten lost in the weeds about is, what is a data center? What is a co-location data center? What is a hyperscale data center? Most medium to larger companies and organizations that I'm familiar with have data centers. City Hall has a data center that supports its operations. Knowledge base. Data centers are here. They're everywhere. But clearly, what we've been hearing about and talking about is this concept of a hyperscale data center. And particularly years ago, people are legitimately concerned, because we're still hearing about issues that happened years ago in the early days of data centers, that, as you and Commissioner Stokes and Ms. Ray have talked about, many of which have really been rectified to a great degree. And I just want to make the comment, Commissioner Duval, it occurred to me as I was sort of doing my studying and talking to people about these issues, that it reminds me of the early days of nuclear power plants. And I lived in Boston in the early 70s, and I think that's when the Pilgrim, was it the Pilgrim and Seagram was being built, and all of the demonstrations and outcry about that. And yet here we are 50-ish years later, and done properly regulated and properly monitored, nuclear power plants have proven to be a pretty safe way of generating power. I think this is sort of where we're at with data centers. And I think one of the things that might help, and Ms. Ray, I think you might be able to start this conversation. I think we'll need more conversation, but what are the different data centers, and at what point, size or application, I'm not quite sure, based on my readings, does a data center kind of flop over into that hyper category that we know has large needs for water and power? Can you shed any light on that?
So there's no bright line that distinguishes a traditional data center from a hyperscale or data center, but typically what you have. The traditional co-location data centers are ones where a company will own the building. They will lease out space to hundreds, potentially thousands of companies, customers, organizations who have their servers and IT operations housed within that structure. Those servers are not all talking to each other throughout the building. It's each company's is isolated. That's the traditional co-location type data center. They are typically smaller. They average around 100,000 square feet. I've seen them up to, say, 400,000 square feet. The ones that are getting the most attention currently in the media are the hyperscale and the AI data centers. They are typically owned by one of your large alphabet companies. They're owned by Amazon Web Services, Google, Microsoft, Oracle, those types of companies, and all of the servers in there are owned by that company, and they are all working together to store, create, and disseminate data. And they do take much more power because of the nature of what those servers are doing. They're stronger servers, they're more powerful, and they do take considerably more electricity, water, natural gas, whatever they're using for their cooling methods. They also take more land area. I've worked with data centers that were multi-million square feet. Those are hyperscale data centers. They take a lot of resources, they take a lot of land. Typically, you won't get one of those types of data centers on 100 acres or 200 acres. You're talking about, I know some developments, they're looking at 800 to multi-thousands of acres. I've worked on campuses that were 300-400 acres. I've worked on smaller campuses that didn't have that much, and were those traditional data centers. There are a lot of concerns that have arisen from those previous generation data centers, and I think some of the concerns have been mitigated to the industry, some through requirements of local governments that have put on the type of technology, buffering, noise mitigation that they're requiring. But I think all of those things need to be addressed for anything that might be considered in the city.
Okay, thank you. I wouldn't run away too quickly. I think I have one more for you. One of the ways in reading the literature that I started thinking in terms of what might be a cut point beyond which we're really starting to get into that hyperscale situation is power utilization, megawatts. In your experience, what's sort of that range of megawatts that might start making you curious or suspicious that we're moving into that hyper category?
I think when you get over 500 megawatts, you start thinking this is a hyperscale AI-driven data center. A co-located traditional data center is typically going to be less than 500.
Most of the reading I've done, the very large scale hyper data centers are on 1,000 acres or more. How many parcels exist currently in the city that would comfortably enable that type of hyperscale development?
We really don't have anything that would enable the type of hyperscale that you're thinking about, right? The parcels that we have would only support a much smaller footprint. Now, how many servers they can put inside, that's a different issue, which you would have to regulate based on the power usage, the water usage, that type of thing. But the footprint itself, we don't have the land area to really support that type of thing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I think I'm done. I'm done with you at this point. I had a couple of questions for City Attorney, but I think your conversation with Commissioner Stokes kind of answered those for me. Suffice it to say, the state giveth and the state taketh away is how I'm kind of looking at this. One bill gives us the ability to regulate locally, and I'll speak for myself, and I suspect I speak for all of us. If we were able to enact those regulations today, I think we would all breathe a sigh of relief. but I'm sort of hearing that that's not necessarily the case. So, and I think I heard the further a development project gets in its cycle, the riskier stopping it is for the city. I would say, however, for myself, and this might not be the most politic thing for me to say, but if at any point with any development, we really started feeling that it was being done in such a way to jeopardize the health and quality of life of this community, I would feel very comfortable stopping it, and I would take my chances in court. So, sorry, city attorney, I know you try to keep us out of jail, but, you know, there's a line, and irregardless of where a project was in its development, I'd call a halt to it personally, if it were all up to me. But I don't know, you know, a lot of the language I'm seeing is just data center. I mean, even our agenda item is to discuss, you know, a moratorium on data centers. Well, if we don't specify what kind of data center, we could preclude any company coming here that has its own data center to support its operations, a company with lots of jobs and good benefits packages and training, on-the-job training and other kinds of professional development, the kinds of companies that I think all of us at one point or another said we wanted to come here to the city because of the lift it would give people here in terms of job and career options. So whichever way we go, I'm really feeling a need, if we do go in the direction of some type of moratorium, that we do our best shot today at defining what we're talking about. But that would not be I think that would be a conversation that would have to continue. I mean, we give it our best shot today based upon what we know, but we definitely have to look at that. To do anything that just says data center, I feel like we're trying to do, we're trying to do eye surgery with a chainsaw. So I think whatever we do, let's be specific and clear about what we're doing before we try to legislate anything. So I'll pass now for others to speak.
Commissioner Petra.
Thank you, Mayor. The data centers are the fastest emerging and impactful industries in the world, and no wonder there's some interest in the city of Northport, because we are the third largest city by land mass in the state of Florida, and only 45% built out. Having said that, I want to make a disclaimer. I will be not talking because based on my emotions for the poll that I did, which was an official poll I did on Facebook, which I could predict fairly accurately the results. Over 1,000 people voted, and that was in opposition of being any data center to be built on a large scale in our city. Having said that, I was more interested in the comments, what people say, because a lot of times we rely on subject matter experts, but a lot of those subject matter experts live in our community, and they bring a lot of value to us as a commission, even because I've been contacted by many people giving me advices, and not just vocal minority, but other people that never spoke on the issue or on any issue in our city. So I just want to talk a little bit about the difference or defining a large scale or hyperscale data centers and what that means. And I don't want to be very nitty-gritty as far, but I know from reading SB 484, the legal threshold in the law is 50 megawatts and not 500 megawatts as was stated just recently. And there is a bright line of distinction between average or small or medium size or smaller size of a data center versus large scale. And the differences of a hyperscale or larger center data centers is that they use extraordinary consumption of electricity, land, and water required to operate that facility. So, just for perspective, a 50 megawatts data center would use the same amount of power of at least 35,000 homes, and that's on the low demand, which can go up to 50,000 homes. That's more than the entire city in terms of structures, not the land use or footprint. This is just extraordinary. And our available land is there because it can only be what was that, 100,000 square feet? We have a lot of parcels of land where potential vendors can come and build those structures. Now, we all know about closed loops and all the other systems, but at any rate, on average, so first we distinguished 50 megawatts, which is actually defined, not defined, but specified in SB 484, 50 megawatts. And that perspective is it's about up to 50,000 homes. That's how much energy that location can consume. That it can put a lot of strain on the grid. Now, in terms of water, they still use water because water evaporates and they have to. And speaking about the closed loop systems, they still have to be discharged. And we have not looked into this, and that discharge has to be treated. There are over, if I'm not mistaken, close to 15 to 20 chemical additives that are added into that water. Now, do we have, as a city, a capacity to treat that water? That's going to be millions of dollars as an impact on financially speaking. But what I'm getting, I've been following data centers for about a year, and I was caught off guard. I did not think there would be any interest in the city of Norfolk. Boy, I was wrong, because as soon as I learned about Soda County, I was surprised. Now, taking into account our geographical, location of Florida State is very narrow, and our fragile ecosystem, and the scarcity of drinking water, I did not think they would come to Florida that fast. But nevertheless, they are popping up everywhere. But what I'm trying to say is they can use up to 52,000 gallons of water per day. And that's very concerning. This alone can be easily a legal defense on our part as a board to issue a moratorium. And I understand this is, there are so many legalities of it, but SB 484 specifically gives us authority or capacity to regulate those data centers, and we should be very responsible to do that. Having said that, I looked at our ULDC, and I would like to note that I have not studied in detail our ULDC as it relates to data centers, but it's important to notice that our code of ordinances does not currently define hyperscale data centers. That alone is concerning. Therefore, how do we even regulate or proceed to navigate this topic? So, and you probably know what I'm leading to. How can we even move forward to even consider or contemplating taking any pre-applications? Our ULDC does not contain definitions or specific regulations for data centers, hyperscale data centers. We need to refine what is allowed and what's the expectations of what not allowed. And I appreciate our economic development team of bringing jobs and development into our community. However, we have to be balanced and be the reason of the voice of reason. And I say this because changing ULDC, which would not take effect until, correct me if I'm wrong, until October 2027. So a 12 months moratorium would not do us much good. So I'm proposing not 24 months, but somewhere in between. I'm proposing an 18 months moratorium in regards. That will give us time to study the issue, to refine or redo or correctify our codes, our ULDC, and you know, Sarasota County has, and we are part of Sarasota County. We have almost, I want to say 35% of preservation or protected land. A dramatic effect of a hyperscale data center would be enormous. And I know there have been some changes in the late technology, you know, that uses less water, less energy. But boy, what if we don't know any impacts of even current hyperscale data centers? The studies that I got a hand on which was provided to me by one of our state representatives, that, you know, the state representatives looked into those studies, and those were done 5-year, 10-year, looking backwards. We don't have anything to back up as far as the impact of the new hyperscale data center invention, if you will. But I'm just very reluctant, and I'm not speaking out of my emotions, not out, you know, the fault that I did. I was entertaining, to say the least. But I would strongly advocate, and I'll be very clear, to do 18 months going retroactively, because it takes 2 readings, and will be gone in the month of August on a recess. So the earliest we could do is September. And I do petition my fellow commissioners to do more discussion on it, or agree on 18 months, not carving out any land that was affected, because SB 484 gives us much broader authority. And to that scale, if a potential vendor is going to come and say, I need this and this much, so it would be not structurally, because we don't have that many buildings in our city that I know of 100,000 square feet. But if, you know, I'm talking specifically about vacant land. So I'm not comfortable carving out any vacant land, even though there's a risk of we have a risk of getting out of a car. So do we stay in the car? So I would not be carving out any partial or part of any parcel affected by hurricane, and that would be, by the way, I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought it's 1 year after SB 180 that it relates to affected structures. Is it 12 months, or is it?
The 1 year provision I think you're referring to is a separate statute that says you cannot institute a moratorium or restrictive covenant for 1 year after a hurricane makes landfall if you are within 100 miles of hurricane's path.
Okay, so yeah, I would be curious to see if we can achieve some consensus and vote on a motion that would allow the city to put a moratorium on any applications, acceptance, review, or approval of any data center for a period of 18 months, going retro, because the vote will be implemented after the second reading. We all understand that. I'm not sure if the public understands that, but whatever we vote today, it's not going to be effective until we do the actual reading, and it has to be 2 readings to that effect. So I think I'm done. I don't want to go in circles, but I just, to conclude, in a drought-prone or growing areas as the city of Northport, data center directly competes with drinking water. Just last week, we were on a conservation of water and rotating schedule of watering our lawns. Just last week, it was specifically on our website. What are we doing if we allow this to go on? So I think we are doing ourselves a disservice if we don't take any action today. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Duval.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I have to address what the Vice Mayor mentioned my name in her comments. And she was correct. What she was talking about was how nuclear power, the safety of nuclear power when nuclear power first began versus today. And using that analogy to compare data centers when they first started to today's technology. And she is correct in that part. The nuclear power industry came from the development of the atomic bomb. After the war, the usage of that power that nuclear fission can create was transferred over to the commercial sector. The first nuclear power plant that produced energy was run by the Army. And in a nuclear power plant, there is a term when a plant automatically shuts down for safety reasons. And there are literally thousands of instruments in nuclear plants that their sole purpose is to shut down the plant safely like that. And I do mean like that. Thousands of valves shut. Power is cut in milliseconds. That's called a scram. Scram comes from a term back from that first nuclear power plant. The fuel bundles were sitting basically in a cavity in the floor. And the nuclear fission takes place. Neutrons, atom breaks, neutron goes from one, hits another one, breaks that apart. Nuclear reaction, chain reaction. The way to stop that was control rods filled with lead, whatever. Gets between the fuel bundles and interrupts the neutrons moving. In that first plant, the way they controlled those control rods down in between was they had a rope with a pulley. And they had a man with an axe. And if they had a problem, he caught the rope. He was the safety control rod axe man. And that's where the term scram comes from. After that long analogy, do you think there's a rope and pulley in the nuclear power plant controlling rods today? No. The control rods are controlled by over 1,500 pounds per square inch of hydraulic pressure that slams them in. when you talk about closed loop cooling in nuclear power plants, there are closed loop cooling systems. Those closed loop cooling systems, the radioactive water that goes into a nuclear reactor gets boiled, makes steam, goes through pipes, turns turbines, and then gets condensed back into hot water and then reheated and fed back in at 520 degrees, 1,320 pounds per square inch of pressure into a reactor. That never gets sent out into the atmosphere. It is a true closed loop cooling system. Now, the reason I can spout all this is I retired 21 years ago from Constellation Energy. I worked as a technician and a supervisor and trainer in the Nuclear Instrumentation and Control Department in nuclear power plants on Lake Ontario. Now, there's all these issues, and I'll try to be short here, but all these issues that have been mentioned so far, water usage, power usage, noise, pollution. What we're going to do today is to decide about a moratorium, not whether we should have a data center or not. And as has already been mentioned, we do have data centers right here in this building, okay? Data centers are no more than basically a lot of computer chips and electricity going through those computer chips, all their functions that do everything, they just generate heat. Anytime you use electricity, there is resistance, and that resistance comes out as heat. And that's why you have to have the cooling. Now, there's just a lot of issues here. One of the issues hasn't been mentioned is something that one of our former commissioners wrote in an email that I read earlier, and it was about the commission years ago putting in a moratorium on taxing data centers. And that's an issue that we have to look at. I mean, if we get a data center, we want to get some revenue from it. So that's one issue to look at. City attorney was mentioning Burt Harris Act, SB 484, SB 180. These are all things that I am not as intimately familiar with as I am with the inside of a nuclear reactor. And I have been inside a nuclear reactor. And believe it or not, nuclear reactors, places where they have them, their taxes are a lot lower than other places. They make so much money for the companies that they can afford to pay taxes. What I'm looking at here is, I want the time to look at SB 180, SB 484, the Burt Harris Act, taxation. I want to be able to familiarize myself with how much water plants are using. Something else that hasn't been mentioned, with the electricity. Commissioner Petro mentioned 100 megawatts, 50 megawatts. Where I work, there were 3 nuclear power plants. One of them was one of the, if not the first, I think it was the first commercial nuclear power plant, 9 Mile Point 1. It's still in operation, and they are applying for a license to get it to go for another, or up to 80 years. And the company is now applying to build a 4th nuclear reactor, and people are not against it. It's in the proper place. It's in a rural place where it's all agriculture, and it does bring in a lot of money for taxes. What I want to see us look at is all of the factors. I don't don't know how much money they use, but when it comes to electricity, if they're using 50 megawatts, there has to be 50 megawatts of generation to power that. When FPL builds anything, somebody has to pay for that. I just want to ensure that it's not our citizens, the companies that make the money from these data centers, they should be paying for that. So, long story short, what I think we should have here is a moratorium and for staff to put together for us workshops so that we can decide how all these different issues will affect things, so we can make a final decision on whether or not we should have data centers, where they should be, how big they should be. I think I said enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. There's a lot I can agree with in what both of you gentlemen have to say. I'm open to a moratorium, but I don't think we need 18 months. In preparation for this meeting, I kind of came up with a list of things that I would like to see, and I'd like to quickly go through them. One of them is to definitely have a commission workshop on this topic so that we have a much better handle of the legal implications and how far we can push the technologies that can mitigate some of these issues. What kinds of controls we might want to put into place, lots of topics that we can work on. So yes, absolutely, Commissioner Duval, I'm on board with you on that. I also think we need to do some community engagement on these exact same topics. Basing our decisions on fear, assumptions, old data, if we do that, we really run the risk of not doing some other things that could really benefit this community in totality. So commission workshop and community engagement events on those same topics are on my list. I'd like to really hammer out what is a hyperscale data center and what are some of these other data center types. So we make sure that however we legislate this, we end up putting the protections in we need to have, and that we don't inadvertently prevent things from coming to our city that can do amazingly wonderful things for people who live here. So definition of hyperscale. I would like to see an ordinance on what kinds of changes we would make to our ULDC specific to data centers with a definition, sooner rather than later. I think it just would be very helpful for all of us to get our arms around what type of building designs, what type of technologies, what type of supportive structures like power plants and water treatment plants do we want to see, and have that conversation so that we all feel more comfortable, and whether we can legally implement those on a voluntary basis with someone who wants to come in and develop, or whether we take the leap and say we're going to mandate it now, a la state Senate Bill 484, we can figure that out later. But I would like to see an ordinance with the kinds of controls we'd all feel comfortable with data centers, particularly of this hyperscale level, to be defined. I think I had a couple more. Yeah, I was very interested in what Director Ray had to say about our noise ordinances. We can look at that right away and make some changes right away, and at least one of those 4 concerns we can take care of. So I would like to see an ordinance come forward, maybe even in September, addressing noise in these sort of hyperscale data centers. And then I think we can get all of this work done by the 1st of January, 2027. So I'd like to also see an agenda topic, perhaps for our first or second meeting in January, with what we learned from all of these activities, what the recommendations are, and at that point, we can decide whether or not we extend a moratorium, but I'd rather see a shorter timeline. You know, let's put some pressure on ourselves to get these things done. We need to sort of have these answers, and maybe we won't have all the answers, but we'll have some major components of a solid policy and path forward sooner rather than later. I just don't think, folks, we can dilly-dally on this one. I think the issues are too pressing, they're too immediate. The conversations are going on, there's a lot of not current information being tossed about, and we need to rectify that sooner rather than later. So those would be my recommendations, and I'm done.
Commissioner Petro.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to address 3 points, and 2 of them Vice Mayor Lincoln addressed, and one of them was definition of what is hyperscale. If we refer to 484 Senate bill, it clearly says the threshold is 50 megawatts, so that's solved. We know that, 54 more megawatts, which is...
Politician's definition.
Well, it is a large-scale data center, if you will. It's because just the amount of electricity they use, it's equivalent to 50,000 homes. So that is the definition of large-scale or hyperscale data center, 50 megawatts. So it's not just politician. I do believe it's in many literature that I reference that. Second of all, is 12 months. I'm not comfortable with that, and simply because if we do any changes to our EOLDC, it doesn't take effect until October 2027, and that is more than 12 months. So we're doing ourselves a disservice, and it's very fairly, in my opinion, is a very defensible component to do 18 months. There's nothing that prevents us from doing 18 months. Yes, we will do the workshops, per staff direction, but 12 months is not justifiable. If we do make any changes, those changes do not take effect. Those changes do not take effect until October 2027. So saying that, let's do 12, it really defeats the purpose of us doing any changes in our local law, if you will, UOC and codes. So I just don't buy that argument. I can't go 12 months because whatever we change or whatever we codify, whatever we refine, it's not going to be taken into effect. So we leave the door wide open. And the next thing I want to address, which would be my third one, is the taxation. And reading our section 3-3, chapter 3, article 1, there are so many things that are favor data centers up to 10 years, 20 years, no ad valorem tax. Basically, data centers are so much financially advantageous to vendors or to developers because they bring a lot of money. They bring a lot of money, and that's proven because this is making money. So if we give them breaks, that's another thing. Of 12 months, we have to change those things that will not be taken into effect, and I'm not sure if we can go retroactively on, whatever is submitted. But as far as tax, but as far as going retro, because of the implementation of vote is not gonna be until September, October. I would go retroactively, just like everything else. I'm proposing a motion of 18 months. And if we are down, I'll be glad to make that motion.
We still have more people to speak.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
City Attorney, you're in the queue, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to point out, if the board is gonna take the position that we can retroactively apply the moratorium ordinance depending applications based on the kind of word doctrine that we discussed and things of that nature, the same logic would apply if what the vice mayor suggested in making the moratorium only for the end of the year and making it as well as the idea that we would bring potential UDLC changes into code. So what I mean by that is don't feel that you have to extend it through October 1st, 2027 or beyond that just because of SB180's application of reverse and restricted nature. You say that depending on ordinance doctrine applies in one case, meaning pending applications, then it would apply to another case where you're directing staff to bring UDLC code up the changes to the incentives. And in addition to that, there's nothing that says you can't do any more further.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Duval.
Thank you, Mayor. When it comes to hyperscale, that's a name. Basically, with a data center, the way they figure whether it's hyperscale or not, it's how much electricity it's using. Okay? The more computer banks, the more multiplexers, the more computer chips they're using, the more electricity they're using. The more, possibly the more water they're using for cooling. If not water, well, then there's got to be fans, cooling banks. It's just a name. It's how many megawatts of power do you want to be able to use if you put something like this in your community? You want to limit it to 50 megawatts, which is, as Commissioner Petro said, enough power to power 50,000 homes. That means you're going to have a certain amount of noise from those cooling fans. You're going to be using a certain amount of power, which has to be generated. Somebody's got to pay for that generation. Or do you want to use have one that's 500 megawatts or larger? But it's just a name. It's just, you're going to put a quantity. Call it a mid-size if it's 500 megawatts. Call it a hyper if it's 1,000 megawatts. They're just names, but keep in mind that it all breaks down to the physical size and the amount of energy and water that you're using and the results from that. Are you heating up the air? Are you adding any pollution? And I really don't see much pollution from something like these. As far as the air quality, there are backup generators, but those backup generators are only used for testing and, in emergency times. But for now, I just think, these workshops on each of these different topics we've talked about, that's what we need. We need the time to do that. That's all.
Thank you. That's everybody has spoken. The one thing that I've listened up here to everybody speaking, and there's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of answers that we need to get to go forward and look at this. Legalities, questions about environment. Commissioner Petro wants moratorium for 18 months. Vice Mayor, 6 months-ish. Well, with that being said, at any given time, if you're within a moratorium, you can either A, extend it, B, rescind it, whichever way you wanna go. So county went with a year. I feel that a year is bare minimum to where we can get all of the information, have all of the town halls, get the citizens input, get everybody engaged and educated from staff. If you're worried about getting this ordinance passed quicker, we can always have, we're off in August, but staff willing, city manager willing, attorney willing, commission willing, we can have special meetings in August to get that passed in August. I'm just saying, if it's time feasible, not saying it is, but there's possibilities that it can happen. With that, I'm gonna turn it over to public comment.
Stacy mentioned why we should say no to data centers in Northport. Northport's groundwater aquifers are already under pressure from population growth, drought, and increasing demand. Additional industrial water withdrawals for data centers could further strain water supplies, lower groundwater levels, impact wetlands and connected surface waters, and raise long-term concerns about water sustainability and quality for residents. Construction and operation of data centers can increase stormwater runoff, sedimentation, and pollution while replacing natural land with impervious surfaces. These changes affect drainage patterns, wetlands, and waterways that ultimately feed the Peace River and Charlotte Harbor watershed. Data centers operate 24/7. Cooling equipment, chillers, ventilation systems, and backup generators create persistent low-frequency noise. Chronic noise exposure has been linked to sleep disruption, stress, reduced quality of life, impaired concentration, and increased cardiovascular risks. Nearby homeowners also face uncertainty about property values and marketability. Introducing industrial-scale infrastructure near residential neighborhoods may negatively affect what is often a family's largest investment. Data centers require massive amounts of electricity, often necessitating new transmission lines, substations, and other infrastructure. While utilities recover these costs through regulated rate structures, residents could ultimately bear higher costs over time. Clearing land for data centers fragments wildlife habitat, reduces tree canopy, increases runoff, and diminishes native vegetation. Artificial lighting can disrupt nocturnal wildlife, migratory birds, and pollinators, while backup generators add emissions during testing and emergencies. Continued industrial development also contributes to the loss of the open space that defines Northport. Support the data center moratorium and deny approval of future data center development in Northport. Michael Springle. Good morning, Honorable Mayor and members of the Northport Commission. Having grown up here and seeing this town develop for almost 30 years, my comment today is to strongly urge the city to adopt a moratorium on building any data centers in the city of Northport. After reviewing the information provided, a simple Google search can show that in many instances, cities are told these centers will be traditional in scale before growing into a hyperscale data center in spite of what was initially approved. Traditional sounds okay getting a foot in the door, but that's all you need. The proverb, it's better to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission, that rings very true when we look at other data centers constructed across the country. The effects on our environment go beyond excessive water and power usage and pollution. It will also affect the quality of life for nearby residents and our Florida wildlife. These centers are not quiet, they are not discreet, they are known for being loud and disruptive without large, long-term economic development in the form of sustained jobs beyond the initial construction period. Young people don't see this as a place to live, but to leave. This town is becoming like its neighbors, only without the beaches. Northport is not Venice or Port Charlotte. I don't believe we should have our town continue going in a direction that chases away its future young residents who spent their formative years here. Having even one data center will only cement that for our younger residents. It's not a partisan issue to not want these centers. The negative impacts are easily researchable. With limited characters for commenting, I can only strongly recommend not having even one here. The city can work towards something that will give younger people real optimism about living here. Public broadband, more investment in public transit or infrastructure, anything but a data center. We can do better than that. Thank you for your time. HH. I think all Northport and surrounding residents would agree that we do not have the water sustainability to accommodate a data center on top of all the flippant commercial construction. Please do not do this to your tax-paying residents. We do not want this. This does not benefit the people who pay your salaries. Travis Howitt. We the people are opposed to data centers in Sarasota County. They have too large of an impact on wildlife and other natural resources. They have no business being anywhere near residential neighborhoods. Liz Reed. Moratorium should become a ban. 1, water drought issues. 2, electricity equals regional price increase we'll have to pay. 3, affects our remaining wildlife. 4, noise, light, air pollutions. 5, no positive features to build. 6, Northport overbuilt already. Richard Howard. We are adamantly opposed to a data center in the city of Northport. Crystal Howard. I am strongly opposed to any data center anywhere near our home and residences, businesses, etc. There are too many environmental impacts, concerns, and issues for what these data centers will demand. The amount of damage to our local water tables in recent droughts should be a clear sign that we should not be entertaining this thought. Please be wise in your decisions as this will affect the future of Northport as we know it. Stephen Lasher. I am born and raised in Sarasota County. I run my family's business here in Venice, and I moved my wife and 2 children to Northport because as a child I loved visiting my grandparents in the Estates and always said that's where I would be going to raise my family. With that being said, I am against all this overbuilding happening in our county, and I am even more opposed to the thought of an energy-sucking loud data center anywhere in this area. No one knows the environmental impact these things may cause, plus we are already in a massive drought and people are being fined in areas of Sarasota County for washing their cars on the wrong days. Yet we want to allow a data center to use millions of gallons of water from our precious aquifer. Please think with your hearts and not your wallets or greed when making any choice about data centers in this area. We simply do not need them in Northport. Thank you. Alex Howitt. Highly against this idea. It costs massive amounts of power to run this data center. Our aquifers will be hit massively as well as our ecosystem and wildlife. Potential power outages are something to consider as again, this infrastructure will take massive amounts of power to run it. This is an incredible waste of our land. The small benefits are nothing compared to the damages this will cause for generations. This has proven effects at aiding cancer in growing and developing. I will not support this idea and I am completely against it. Jasher Howard. The resources needed to maintain this development far exceeds the current supply that Northport and neighboring areas can currently handle, essential with the water issues. Not to mention the power costs going up and other power issues. Not to mention the size of the project is way larger and has proven to harm both human lives and the wildlife at the current technological advancements. There is no logical point in adding this to the ongoing projects that are currently holding many roads from operating at the capacity they need, to such as I-75 at several points, and with both the Sumter exit and Tropicare, the amount of projects currently active should be a priority before something as large as this should be thought of and only worked on once technology can provide adequate shielding and less environmental usage. W. McDowell. I need a lot more information outlining the pros and cons data centers would have or have on our amazing city, including the environmental impacts. Therefore, I hope you'll create a moratorium prohibiting any development activities for at least a year so everyone can learn more about the subject. My public comment is really about the tax incentives relating specifically to data centers. It's eye-opening. In November 2020, the voters approved a referendum almost 2-1, allowing ad valorem property tax exemptions for economic development. In February 2021, the Commission approved Ordinance 2021-04, amending Chapter 3 of the City Code. This section of the City Code outlines the process for a business to apply for ad valorem tax exception and the Commission's approval denial process. City Code Chapter 3-3 specifically allows the Commission to exempt a business from paying property taxes for up to 10 years. However, only data centers are specifically mentioned and granted a property tax exemption for up to 20 years, 2 decades of not paying property taxes. Fast forward to August 2024, when the Commission approved Ordinance 2024-13 to rezone the city with the sole purpose to increase the tax base. What a sticky wicket those 2 ordinances have created. Increase the tax base versus granting tax exemptions. Since this is an important component of the data centers discussion, please consider giving an additional direction to bring back an amendment to Chapter 3 of the City Code by removing data centers from receiving any tax exemptions or at the very least reduce the 20-year time frame. Megan Goral. I am opposed to the data center even being a possibility in Northport and surrounding areas. The damage caused to the environment for miles around where a data center goes is not something the voters of Northport are okay with. Other data centers have promised not to need local sources like water, but have within 2 years when needed to connect to multiple resources. Colorado has a data center that in their building plan stated no water needed and now wants to connect directly to the Colorado River. We need to conserve all of our resources for our wonderful Northport citizens, not data. In person, I have Tim Ritchie, followed by Victoria Egglestoy and Kelly Bowman.
Well, good afternoon. I would like to thank you, Commissioner Petro, for your excellent comments this morning. Actually, they were exceptional, not just excellent. I was fortunate enough to have a management consultant as a father, but not just any management consultant. My father ran probably the second largest management consulting firm in the United States of America. I used to enjoy when he'd have phone conversations with our neighbor, who lived about 9 houses down the street. He ran a little company called Oxy Petroleum, Arm & Hammer. Boy, I'll tell you, Mosaic is really slick. I love these industries where they put out this slick stuff, like nuclear energy. I was beat really bad when I was about 6 years old. I came home, there was a flyer for nuclear power plants. Yeah, I got beat because I was against that. But let me tell you, you ever hear of 3 Mile Island? I was in tears when I saw the farms and the animals. It was amazing to see my father apologize to me. Humility. I want to tell you right now, it's not just in Maine. And this just isn't a city. And our government governs air, land, and water. And I want to tell you, city attorney or county attorney here, I really enjoyed your comments too. This is so much more serious than just a 6-month moratorium rushing this. As Glenn Gibolina from Manatee County, who's running for commissioner up there, what's the hurry? Facts are stubborn. Fukushima. When my friends catch fish in Malibu, guess what they have in it? Isotope, radioactivity from Fukushima. How about Chernobyl, Russia? You ever have any friends from Ukraine? I did. She told me about the black rain. Now, our watershed, Manager Fletcher, is in deep trouble, sir. Deep trouble. And we don't have any more times to hold hands with our legislative delegations up in Tallahassee, licking and sucking boots. This is what it takes for one email. One email. 850 gallons of water. Getting drunk on water.
I'm not going to read what I've prepared because it just reiterates all the usage of water and electricity that we don't have an abundance of anymore. The potential negative impacts of data center expansion on carbon emissions, water use, and electricity are well documented, but their potential PFAS pollution, both direct and indirect, is less well known. Data centers use PFAS to cool their servers and suppress fires. PFAS pollution from data centers is difficult to ascertain and likely limited because cooling systems generally run as closed loops. but manufacturing companies that produce the PFAS materials used in data centers have historically emitted them, which harms communities and ecosystems near their facilities. Chemours is one of the largest global producers and one of the biggest suppliers of PFAS materials for data centers. Coolants in semiconductor production are used to make the microchips deployed in the data centers in vast quantities. The company aims to expand its materials, in particular resin for semiconductor manufacturing, to accommodate the growth of data centers across the country. This will likely have repercussions on the environment. In North Carolina, airborne PFAS emissions from Chemours operations have contaminated more than 7,000 drinking water wells, according to researchers. Nobody has asked a question or even talked about our hurricanes that we have. What if a hurricane hits a data center and blows all the construction and the materials in it around the state of Florida and in our water systems? Nobody addresses that. So what is that going to do to the environment, our water, the human life, everything? That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Bauman, and I'm from Englewood, Florida. And we all rely upon the same water. That's why more and more people are showing up and voicing their concerns. We don't have enough, right? And as Vicki mentioned about the hurricanes, I was going to mention that because what happens if this data center that ever comes here is impacted and they demand their power? What happens to the people who get service first? Right? I've been fighting a road for a year and I'm still peeling back the onion. I can guarantee you it'll take you more than a year to peel back this onion. You do not have the information, you do not have the technology. If it's a large scale data center, you're talking about medium voltage. You're talking about, those aren't jobs for the locals. Hardly anyone works on medium voltage. And you will have to discharge the water from the closed loop system. It purges, it scales, and it takes an enormous amount of product to descale that water. Where does it go? I don't know, Mr. Duvall, perhaps your backyard? I mean, to think that we are going to impact our environment that is so precious near the coast here. The amount of the agriculture, like, yeah, just fill up the agriculture land, that's a good place for it. Are you kidding? What are we preserving? Who is protecting the people? You guys, they're here for you to listen to them, to respect their concerns, their safety. You do not know the impacts of the safety, the water, the air quality, all of it will be affected. And don't make a decision unless you know that you are absolutely sure about your decision. This business of approving projects and not having all the information. Could you ever, in your prior life, go up and present a product and not have all the information? No. And if you pass it, do you think you're not liable for your decision? Do you think you're not accountable? Do you think your children, your grandchildren, whomever will be spared from the effects because you sit behind this board? No. I urge you, 6 months, I'm not sure what 6 months will do for anything, but for God's sakes, you guys have the decision to make. Figure it out. Figure out the legal loopholes that the developers figure out. It's there. Don't do a moratorium. Do whatever is necessary, the language changes, whatever, to stop it.
Thank you.
Jim Witowski, followed by Robin San Vicente and Carolyn Price.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Jimmy Witowski, resident in Englewood. I ask the Commission to proceed with extreme caution before encouraging or approving these types of developments in Northport. Hyperscale data centers are unlike traditional commercial buildings. They can occupy hundreds of acres, require enormous electrical capacity, consume a significant amount of water for cooling, and some designs and often require substantial upgrade to public infrastructure. As Northport continues to grow, our priority should be ensuring that our existing residents and businesses have reliable electricity, water, transportation, emergency services. We should not put additional strain on those systems without fully understanding the long-term effects. Another concern is land use efficiency. These facilities can consume large amounts of industrial or employed land while creating relatively few permanent jobs compared with other economic development projects. We should ask whether this is the highest and best use of limited land in the Northport area. Noise is another issue that deserves careful attention. Backup generators, cooling equipment, mechanical systems can operate around the clock. Even when they meet technical standards, they may affect nearby neighborhoods and reduce residents' quality of life. We should also consider resilience as Florida experiences stronger storms, increasing demands on the electrical grid. Adding facilities with exceptionally high power requirements raises important questions about energy reliability and emergency planning. Most importantly, I urge the Commission not to make policy based solely on promises of economic development. Instead, establish clear standards before any applications are submitted. Those standards should address appropriate locations, setbacks, buffering, noise limits, water use, energy demands, emergency power systems, environmental protection, and public transparency. If Northport decides that hyperscale data centers may be appropriate, they should only be located where necessary infrastructure already exists, where surrounding land uses are compatible with where nearby residents and natural resources are protected. I respectfully ask Commission to put residents first, protect our infrastructure, preserve our quality of life, and adapt a cautious, deliberate approach before opening the door to hyperscale data centers developed in Northport. Sarasota County, I would take their lead in at least a 1-year moratorium. You're going to need at least that amount of time, if not a year and a half, 18 months, to gather all the information that you need to make a good decision.
Thank
For
you,
the
sir.
residents.
Again, thank you for having the discussion. It's definitely needed. I'm just gonna touch on one of the things. When City Attorney, you mentioned the Burt-Harris Act, and you mentioned the word burdensome. There are precedences that have been set on the percentage of burdensome. Actually, a developer of a data center challenges and they state it falls under the Burt-Harris Act. Well, that's actually not true. You can explore the different terms of burden and the percentages of how we were actually burdening that particular developer on that particular parcel or acreage. So that's one thing to take into consideration. The other thing is also redefining the types of data centers. The only area that a hyperscale data center can go in our city is in Activity Center 6 or 10. That's the amount of acreage. It's totally, nothing is out there. We have nothing out there except the interchange that's forthcoming. We don't need a hyperscale data center of any kind in our city. There's too much unknowns with it. There is scientific data that backs up all of the repercussions of a hyperscale data center. Even mid-scale data centers can take up anywhere from 50 to 100 acres. You're still gonna suffer the repercussions of these data centers to our natural resources, specifically to our right to quiet enjoyment. And under legal ramifications of our rights to quiet enjoyment, there's lawsuits pending now, all over the country, because of the loss of our right to quiet enjoyment. That's a whole other issue to take into consideration. Our quality of life issues, our public health and safety issues, the amount of services that it's going to be taking just from our city services in order to properly take care of these facilities and be on demand if an emergency happens. I love your comments, Commissioner Duval, about nuclear power plants, but as Tim Ritchie had said, there's a whole bunch of accidents that have taken place. Nothing is safe. Human error comes into place all the time, all the time. And then when we look at our economic development strategy, one of the targeted industries is web-enabled technologies, and everything is cloaked and masked under that particular category. So again, we need to make data centers clearly defined within all of our documents. What I was gonna ask the city attorney, if he could maybe answer a question, due to the timeline of instituting an ordinance, is it possible that you could do a resolution in the meantime as an emergency meeting next week in order to express the intent and the policy direction on what the data centers is gonna be while you do the ordinance?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. First point, I've been up here several times, and it bothers me that when people are speaking, citizens are speaking to you, a lot of times you're not looking them in the face, and I think that's rude, to be honest. I live out on the dead end of Toledo Blade, across the street from the 320 project. I'm sure you're familiar with that. The front part of that, and I'm not sure how many acres, but it's a couple hundred, I believe, is now zoned industrial, which you did, even though the citizens on that section of Toledo Blade are all residential on the other side of the street. My fear is that you could put a data center in across the street from me. My property has already lost value because you have approved zoning for an industrial park across the street from me. And it's in the middle of preserves and ranch, you can put this industrial center. You rezoned the city of Northport's property without telling these people that it was gonna be rezoned. And told us, when I brought it up in a meeting, I was told it's too expensive for us to notify these people to let them know that we're gonna rezone their property. The next meeting after this was rezoned, you guys said, well, let's send out a postcard and let them know after the fact. I think that's pretty sneaky. I don't believe that they should have any kind of tax exemption. I think they should pay the full amount of taxes right from the get-go. There are many videos, and I don't know, I'm sure some of you have seen them, of cities that are voting, and counties that are voting against these data centers. It's very prevalent on Facebook and et cetera. They are removing city commissioners, county commissioners, they are voting them out, communities, because they're not following the wishes of the citizens of that community. There's no way you can tell me that my electrical increases are not gonna happen. It's documented in numerous of these videos that I've watched, that these people's electrical costs have increased 50 to 100%. Question number one, why is Hurricane Ian not listed as being included in this whole study? That was a 100-year hurricane. I had water running down Toledo Blade. If they build a data center across the street, what happens? Number one, is my well gonna be polluted? Am I gonna have noise pollution? Am I gonna have vibration? There's just so many questions and so many other comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colin Andrew, followed by Samuel Turpinning.
Hi, my name is Colin Andrew. I grew up in Northport, moved from Sarasota, I think it was in second grade. And Toledo Blade had a little rope light on it. And so we moved here because there were, lots were cheap for one. But there was just woods everywhere. And it was great. We had, just animals running everywhere. It was wonderful. And I'm back in Sarasota now. It's about 10, 15 years I think I lived here. Family has a business here. And every time I've been coming back to Northport recently, and it seems like you guys just are trying to, and forgive me, I don't know too much on it, so I might be incorrect on it, is just trying to get more industrial use in Northport and ruining the beauty of it. I remember when they were trying to put like a Target right near homes, and it was like a big issue in the city. So it seems like the city really just doesn't know what it's doing most of the time, to be quite fair. But it seems like the citizens are really informed. And so I think, and I've been all throughout Florida, and just so you know, I think Mr. Duval, almost everybody in America is fighting this, but the nuclear scientist is saying that we're all wrong. I mean, it doesn't take a nuclear scientist or a rocket scientist to figure out that people don't want it. And I think the bottom line comes down to is you can hear the stats all day, you can argue how much water and closed loop and all this other stuff. If citizens don't want it, it's not your job to think that you know better, unless you have information behind NDAs that we don't. I think Mr. Petro is correct. I think he should be mayor, and the rest of you guys should just go home. I did want to bring up though, is that the more I see people being informed, the more it seems like intimidation. Like I know in Fort Meade, that's what happened with the group I'm working with that's recalled all of their people. The guy that's leading the recall actually had people from the city driving by his home taking video of his house, trying to intimidate. They opened up all the petition boxes when they weren't supposed to. And so there's a bunch of stuff going on there. The mayor's got a bunch of crap going on. He owns property, and so when the construction short-term jobs come in, he's gonna make money off that. And so one of the big things is while you guys are all at work, I'll get that. You guys are here making decisions on rezoning and all these things, and people don't have a clue until, like you said, afterwards, it's already happened. And these issues affect people where they live, they affect their health. I've heard people who come up and say they have cancer, they don't want this. Having to do with electricity costs, do you want, dude, I keep knocking all these over. I'll pick them all if I swear. This is the worst placement. Maybe we can pay for a better one than a $200,000 a year city manager. But on the intimidation thing, I wanted to say, just bring this up briefly. Debbie McDowell, great lady, held a meeting to try to teach people the government and you. And it was really weird that half of the city administration showed up and was sitting there and didn't even engage with people. It almost felt like intimidation. It was a little weird. The chief of police was there. None of them interacted with any of the people.
Thank you.
So I thought that was kind of odd. Yeah, right. Hi guys, my name is Sam Turpening, and after Mr. Ritchie and after Mr. Cullen, Andrew, who can follow up with that. But let's stand here today for Thomas Paine. I did write a speech, but I don't really think that I need to. Thomas Paine is the one that wrote the speech for Common Sense. Mr. Petro, the light that shines through you for your integrity. We really appreciate that today, sir. God bless you. That won't be forgotten. Sir, talking about nuclear power. That is some kind of futuristic fantasy that you're talking about, sir. I don't know where you're coming up with the things that you're talking about just because that's the world that you used to live in. But in this world, it says that it takes 15 years in order to build nuclear power plants. So my question is, sir, are these nuclear power plants already planned in Northport City? I would like to know, sir. Where are they coming from? It tells me that it's going to take 15 years to build one. Nuclear power, you've been on and on, nuclear power. Where's the plant, sir? The federal government and Donald Trump, you know, the president, sir, he says that no parts for these facilities can come from the Republic of China, sir. That means that they don't have American corporations that are building these parts in order to facilitate building them. They are so behind schedule, sir.
No.
Therefore, they cannot be built. Furthermore, and lastly, I mentioned Thomas Paine and Common Sense because if it was not for him, we would all not be here today. You work for us. Remember that. As they said about being elected, you can be elected out. This is America, and this is the Constitution, and the people are speaking, and the people that know the truth give us much more credit than you think that we do. We know much more than you think that we do. And we're here to defend that. Just like Thomas Paine did back in the 1774, 75. 250 years of our Constitution, we stand before you and say there's no water. That's the common sense. There is no water. Each of you will not have any water to drink. Each and every one of you on there, when you go to flush the toilet, there will be no flush in the toilet because the wells are dry. Common sense. All the other stuff doesn't matter if you don't have a drink of water. Without water, we all die. Each and every one of you. We all die. Please remember that. One drink of water. That's what we're talking about here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Alright. Moving on to, I'm gonna request a motion.
I'll make it.
Go ahead, sir.
I move to direct the city.
No. Commissioner Stokes.
Oh, I did.
I heard that. I didn't hear you.
Hopefully it incorporates your thoughts.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to direct city manager to immediately issue an official public notice and schedule as soon as legally allowable an agenda item to enact an ordinance to impose an 18-month moratorium retroactively on accepting and approving any applications for data centers within the city limits of Northport, excluding those properties under SB 180, which were affected by storms Debbie, Helene, or Milton.
I'll second for discussion.
I have a,
Can you repeat it one more time, please? A little slower, so I
A motion to direct city manager to immediately issue an official public notice and schedule as soon as legally allowable an agenda item to enact an ordinance to impose an 18-month moratorium retroactively on accepting and approving any applications for data centers within the city limits of Northport, excluding those properties under SB 180 that were affected by storms Debbie, Helene, or Milton.
get that in quick.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second for discussion purposes.
Okay, let's discuss.
Carving out the properties meeting structures or vacant land for rural.
If you could speak up, because I'm
Oh, I'm sorry.
having a hard time hearing you, and I'm sitting 2 people away from you, so please.
I'm sorry. Carving out the parcels or structures, or what are we talking about, that have been affected by the hurricanes?
The reason I brought out specific use the word properties is because SB 180 is very specific about that issue. And I wanted to be able to put as much legal meat or strength into this moratorium by excluding those properties. They're developed properties, so, you know, I mean, what did a hurricane do to Activity Center 6 or 10? It affected properties that were developed and built, so I thought that that language, based on what I heard from city attorney, gave me cause to add that little piece just to give our moratorium ordinance that much more legal strength if it were to be challenged. That was my thinking.
Huh? I agree. I agree.
Are you good, sir?
Yes.
All right, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I would feel a lot more comfortable if we added to this moratorium some specific tasks or things that we want to achieve in that time frame. I mean, I personally said I think a year is too long, but again, at any time, a development can ask for relief. We can choose to discontinue at any time, so I'm not going to challenge that. But I think there are so many important things we need to do during this moratorium period that I would would like it to be part of the motion. If the motion maker isn't amenable to that, I'll make a second motion requiring it. So I'll ask.
You know, you might want to make it a separate motion only from the standpoint, Commissioner, that there is such a plethora or an abundance of issues to discuss, investigate, study, learn more about. I don't know how we could possibly include all those things in a motion to establish and enact a moratorium. But if you wanted to take a swipe at a motion that included all those separately, I'd be certainly open-minded to hear it, because the more the merrier, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I mean, my major rationale, and I would ask city attorney to weigh in on this, it was my understanding in my conversation that if a municipality enacts a moratorium of any type or length, it is legally more secure if that moratorium includes some of the specific issues or activities that the city wants to see happen in that time frame. So it's in the spirit of, I think it's important for these things to happen. I would ask city attorney to weigh in on whether there's value in having it incorporated in this specific motion, or if I can make a second one, your call, sir.
So let me add just a little bit to that, so since you're gonna answer it anyways. With what she wanted to do, would it be better if we had a separate agenda item on a future meeting to discuss this, the parameters of that with a little bit of time? I mean, setting the moratorium in place now, adjusting the parameters at a future date to make sure that we cover everything. That's all I was gonna add to it.
I think we're all saying the same thing. You will have a future agenda item because we'll have to bring ordinance back.
Correct.
So the more direct, and I will draft the ordinance for you all, if that's the way you want to go. The more direction you give me now, the better ordinance I can bring forward to you at a future date. So if there's some specific things that you want in there, and we can all agree, then we'll put them in, and then you can debate that ordinance at a future date, and you can take things out, put things in, and can use it in between first and second. If that is where you want, if that was, answers your question. And I think, Vice Mayor, your question was, would a moratorium ordinance that directs staff in terms of, that includes planning tool issues, would be a strong, or would withstand a legal challenge. And the answer to that is yes, but we don't have the ordinance before you yet. So if you want to give more direction now, great. If not, we can always debate it at the future agenda meeting.
Well,
And one more thing too, city clerk, would it be best to have an amendment to the motion or a separate motion?
Either
Or
one
what?
would work for me.
Pardon me?
Either one works for me.
Okay.
I'd like to make an amendment based on city attorneys
I was looking for two people.
and city managers.
So where I wanna interfere or interject my view, the less is better. And if you look at other jurisdictions, and the motions they made, it's very short and concise. The more we cancel and encapsulate, the more legal challenges we might have. And obviously I agree with the mayor saying, let's make another agenda item and talk about specificity of what we want to accomplish. And remember what the city attorney said at the beginning, it's a planning tool. So all it gives us ability is to plan. In that motion or moratorium, we don't have to be very specific of what we want to accomplish. All we're saying is we doing the actual moratorium of this many months. I concur with with Commissioner Stokes and with Mayor. And I don't think it's a good idea to amend this motion because it exposes us as a board and as a city to more legal challenges. And I'm not the
I
lawyer.
heard just the opposite from
Well,
the city attorney.
Well, he said it at the beginning, this is a planning tool, and at the end, he said the same thing. So if we put more and more stuff in our motion, there is more of legal challenges to be picked on. if you will. So that's my 2 cents on it. I just think the motion is perfect as it is, made by Commissioner Spokes.
Okay, city manager, I see you're in the queue.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You guys cleared up one thing, which was that the city attorney is the one who actually drafts the moratorium and ordinance that you're looking for, the city manager. But also to let you know, there was a question, I think it was Commissioner Stokes who asked it, was there an application received this time? And the answer is yes, we have received an application at this time.
There you go. Yeah, they beat you to it.
Well, I would like to suggest an amendment.
She has the right to make an amendment.
And again, it's based on what I heard city attorney say, that including things that we want to have happen during the moratorium period will make for a stronger legal position if we are challenged. So I will go through my list of the things that I would suggest we work on. This is a planning tool, so these are the things I would like to have happen. One, that we schedule a commission workshop on hyperscale data centers and data centers in general and related sustainable technologies as a learning and potential planning tool. That we conduct a community engagement event or a series of such, sharing that same information. That staff come back to the commission with suggested definitions of hyperscale and the sources of those definitions. That we quickly update the city's noise ordinance to include frequencies typical of hyperscale data centers. That at a time to be determined, that we, and I'd like to see it in January of 2027, that we see a presentation from staff on the results of all of these activities, including recommendations to our ULDC, restrictions and requirements that we would like to see in our ULDC that would restrict and put in place guardrails for data centers. And a review and possible revision of the city's current tax treatment and any potential tax or other exemptions relative to data centers and hyperscale data centers. That's my list.
City clerk, did you get all that?
I did not, but I'm gonna read what I got, and you just fill in the words, okay? Schedule workshop on hyperscale data centers and
related technologies.
okay. Conduct community engagement event or series sharing information.
The same information.
For staff to come back with suggested definitions of hyperscale and sources of
A definite potential definitions of hyperscale data centers and the sources of those definitions.
update the noise ordinance to
update the city's noise ordinances to include frequencies typical of hyperscale data centers. And I kind of munged the next one with that. Let me pull it out.
At a time to be determined, see a presentation from staff on results of activities, including recommendations to the ULDC
Yeah,
regarding.
let me pull out that ULDC just to make it clearer. It will be its separate item. So, update the city's noise ordinances and include frequencies typical of hyperscale data centers, period. Then complete an ordinance complete an update to the city's ULDC to include requirements for hyperscale data centers to incorporate sustainable technologies in their designs.
You start going really fast.
I'm sorry.
To include requirements for hyperscale data centers.
Yes, to incorporate sustainable technologies in their designs.
Technologies in their designs.
Yep.
Okay.
Review and possibly revise the city's current tax treatment and any potential tax or other incentives or exemptions relative to hyperscale data centers.
Okay.
And then deliver a presentation of the results and recommendations at a future commission meeting.
To schedule a workshop on hyperscale data centers and related technologies, conduct community engagement event or series sharing the same information, staff to come back with suggested definitions of hyperscale data centers and sources of definitions, update noise ordinance to include frequencies typical of hyperscale data centers, complete and update to city's ULDC to include requirements for hyperscale data centers and incorporate technologies and their designs, review and possibly revise the current tax treatment and any potential tax or other exemptions or provisions related to data centers, and to deliver a presentation on results and recommendations at a future meeting.
Well done.
All right, I have a motion on the floor that we've heard about 3 times now. Do I have a second?
I'll second for the purpose of discussion.
Go ahead and discuss.
And I understand, in my understanding, this is an amendment to the original motion.
Correct.
All these points of discussion are part of the agenda item that we're not discussing. It almost seems like a separate discussion or agenda item. I have not assessed any of those, and it's not a bit unfair because we're bundling them into original motion of moratorium. And from the city's attorney's introduction, and again, I bring that point of Commissioner Duval as well, that we are talking about moratorium. These are just, ideas of implementation of the planning tool that we are majorly voting on moratorium. So I don't know if it's
The way that I look at it, I understand what you're saying. We have the original motion for the moratorium. This is an addition to moratorium A. Part B is staff's responsibility coming back to the commission. So it's in one motion to get both completed. That's the way I look at it. So, if there's nothing else, you weren't in the queue, sir. I'm sorry. You're all right.
I just popped it up because of what I heard my fellow commissioners say. I also concur with Commissioner Petro on this matter. The reality is that there is a plethora, I'll use that word again, there is a ton of questions, concerns. First and foremost is we can sit and hypothesize about all these issues that have been highlighted in the amendment, when the bottom line really comes down to, now that there actually is an applicant, what the heck are they really thinking they're gonna build here? What are the specifics? What technologies are they gonna use to mitigate all these areas? None of this is discussed, and none of this can really be included in the motion. So, I don't support the amendment. I just say motion as is, and let's get this thing on its way. As it is now, we have an uphill battle, and I say we better pull our resources together, because this is a hill, in my opinion, to die on. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
The original motion includes 18 months retroactively. I'm at a loss at what concerns Commissioner Stokes and perhaps some of my other commissioners to be really clear on what work we expect to have happen between now and during the moratorium. I'm baffled as to why there would be any reluctance to communicate to the community precisely what work we have to do. All of these things are to help us answer the questions and to build information and to make sure that whatever legislation we do is based on facts, as much information as possible, that we mitigate immediately where we can the noise ordinance. Why wouldn't you want to do that? And make it specific and have it be required as part of this motion. I am at a loss. Don't we owe it to the community for them to see what kind of work we want to do while we have this moratorium?
Make a separate motion, just like I'm gonna make a separate motion that we hold 2 meetings ASAP in the month of August to install and enact an ordinance for a moratorium. Make it as a separate motion, then I can support it.
Sure, it's already retroactive.
Enough. We have a motion and an amendment. I'm gonna call the question on the amendment. Vote.
This is on the amendment.
This is on the amendment, sir. And that passes 3-2. Now I am moving on to the original motion. Please vote. And that passes 5-0. Now I will entertain motions separately.
I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to set a meeting as soon as possible to enact the first reading of an ordinance for our moratorium. Or if we respond.
I have a motion on the floor made by Commissioner Stokes. Did you catch that, City Clerk?
Direct staff to schedule a meeting as soon as possible to act on the ordinance for the moratorium.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Commissioner Duval. There's nothing to that.
One point I would like, that as soon as possible means August, not September, just so everybody understands. There's no reason to wait.
Would you like me to reword your?
Sure, add it right in. Please, thank you.
Do I still have a second to the motion? All right, there's nothing to that. Please vote. That passes 4-1. I didn't see who descended, Vice Mayor descended it. Do you have anything to that?
Yes.
Okay.
The moratorium is already retroactive. I don't see any value in rushing staff or city attorney to draft this moratorium language. Let's have it our first meeting in September is my feeling. That's fine. Let's do it right. The protection is already there. The moratorium is retroactive.
All right, that's it. Okay, we're gonna be moving on to lunch. Come back to, at 1:15, it's 12:35. Do like a 40-minute lunch, is that okay with staff, city manager?
Yes.
No, we don't vote on that, I'm gonna decide. No, we'll be back at 1:15, thank you, sir. Yeah, we did. She dissented and gave a reason for her dissent.